Karate friends, welcome to Classics in Color, your weekly dive into some of the ancient world's wackiest facts. I'm Marc Graves, and today I want to talk to you about psoriasis, ancient disease that we're not even sure existed, but it sure is horrific, the descriptions that we do have. And I just have to give you a quick warning, this is not for the faint of stomach. I was getting physically nauseous just reading about this stuff, so just be warned if you want to proceed with the rest of the video. So this video is basically inspired by an article called Psoriasis, the Riddle of the Lousy Disease by Dr. Bondison. So the idea of the disease is that you slowly start to rot from the inside out, like your flesh starts to rot, and then from that rot, insects are spontaneously generated. And these little cysts will form on your body, can be all over, and when you pierce the cyst, you won't even get any pus. Usually what you'll just get is an explosion of insects, basically, and you can see them all piled in on there or burrowing into the skin. So extremely nasty. Now, the idea of spontaneous generation, I got to explain that for you guys real quick, is an ancient concept, and it survived all the way through the medieval period is that life can be generated ex nihilo, spontaneously, go figure that's what that means. But to give an example to help illustrate this for you is, say if you found a corpse in the woods as an ancient person, you would notice larvae start to crawl out of it, and you didn't understand that flies came and laid eggs in the larvae, and then eggs on the corpse, and then the larvae hatch, right? All you see is just them bubbling out, so you think that the corpse is slowly generating or turning into these insects. So there are lots of different examples of this happening with different insects, sometimes even mice, where they are thought to be generated from either rotting flesh or sometimes just from dirt and mud, etc. So the idea is that if you start to rot, there's nothing stopping insects from generating from that rot. Now, we have many stories of people getting this disease in the ancient world, but we can't trust any of them, basically, because they're all stories about very famous and controversial, sometimes powerful, or reportedly very evil people, right? So these were people that were very hated, and the people who were hating on them wanted nothing more than to believe that they died from this horrible, painful, icky disease, right? Especially since it was also considered, if you had this disease, to be a sign that you were not just physically rotten, but morally rotten as well, literally rotten to the core. So you could only get this disease if you were a terrible person, and so of course everyone spread rumors all the time that different powerful and controversial people had this disease. So a great example of this comes from Plutarch's Life of Sulla. So this is a Roman dictator who people really hated because he was responsible for a lot of people dying and a lot of suffering and pain. So I'll go ahead and give that quote to you now. Even though he had such a wife at home, he consorted with actresses, harpists, and theatrical people, drinking with them on couches all day long. For these were the men who had most influence with him now: Roscius, the comedian, Sorex, the arch-mime, and Metrobius, the impersonator of women. Good grief, right? For whom, though past his prime, he continued up to the last to be passionately fond, and made no denial of it. By this mode of life, he aggravated a disease which was insignificant in its beginnings, and for a long time he knew not that his bowels were ulcerated. This disease corrupted his whole flesh also, and converted it into worms, so that although many were employed day and night in removing them, what they took away was as nothing compared with the increase upon him. But all his clothing, baths, hand basins, and food were infected with that flux of corruption, so violent was its discharge. Therefore he immersed himself many times a day in water to cleanse and scour his person, but it was of no use, for the change gained upon him rapidly, and the swarm of vermin defied all purification. So very unpleasant, right? And you can see that Plutarch blames him getting this disease on his extravagant partying lifestyle. So not just Sulla, but Herod, Plato, Antiochus, all those people got accused of getting this disease because they were moral degenerates, basically. And it was a lot of fun for everyone else to accuse them of having this. So there were some treatments that you could try, for instance, bathing in petrol, sulfur, or mercury, not super pleasant there. And even Celsus, who's a legit medical medical writer, lists this disease, although it's a little bit different. It's a variant, but he does list it, so that means he thought it was a real thing, and he gives you some treatments you can try, which include getting an enema, which he recommends for basically everything. He's a little obsessed, and he also recommends shaving your head, fasting, and there's some different medicines he recommends. So it seems like it was a legit medical concern that people had, and there were cases that continued to be reported all the way through the medieval and early modern period, but then it starts to peter out, and we don't know anyone in the modern period who has this disease. We don't have like proof or photographs of anything of anyone having this until in 1940 Dr. Oudemans discovered this phenomena in birds, where they will have these whole little colonies of insects that are living under their skin, and you can pierce the skin and see it, and it's super nasty. But he theorized, well, if it's a real thing in birds, it's perfectly possible that at some point in the ancient world it was a real condition that some human got, which is extremely unfortunate to think that somebody actually had this, right? Thank you so much for checking out this extremely disgusting video on psoriasis. I hope you got some morbid enjoyment out of it, or you learned something, or you're just relieved that this no longer exists. And I hope to see you all again next week, where I will have a more uplifting topic. Thank you so much to subscribers and to Patreon members. Kairete.